Today we're going to be making crepes without using a crepe maker. The ingredients we're going to need for the recipe today are 3 eggs, 1 teaspoon of salt, 2 teaspoons of white sugar, 3/4 cups of all-purpose flour, and 3/4 cups of milk. In order to make the batter for the crepes, what I usually start with is measuring up the flour and the milk. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up my flour and I'm going to use a 1/4 cup measuring cup. If you have a 3/4, that's great. I don't, so I'm just going to use a 1/4 cup and measure 3/4 of a cup into a bowl and put it off to the side till we're ready for it later. So there's 2, and then using my knife to level, I have my 3/4 of a cup of all-purpose flour. The next thing I'm going to do is measure out my milk. So I have a 1 cup measuring cup, and I'm just going to find the 3/4 mark, which is right there, and I'm going to pour out 3/4 of a cup of milk right about there. I put that off to the side until we're ready for that. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to get my eggs. So my 3 eggs, and I'm going to crack them into the bowl. So I'm going to crack the first one. Second egg. And our 3rd egg. Now, at this point, you probably have eggs all over your fingers, so that's probably a good time to wash up those hands. Okay, so now that we have our eggs in there and our hands are clean, I'm going to beat up those eggs just with a fork. We are going to switch over to a whisk later, but I just find it's much easier to get those eggs nicely beaten with a fork than with a whisk, so I use both. So now that our eggs are beaten, I'm going to measure up my salt. So I need 1 teaspoon of salt. There we go, 1 teaspoon of salt. And then I need 2 teaspoons of sugar. I'm going to get my sugar out. Measure out my 2 teaspoons of sugar. Alright. So these are super easy. I've got most of my ingredients in the eggs. I'm now going to grab my whisk. Here, and mix in the eggs with the salt and the sugar. Once we have that well mixed, we're going to add our flour and our milk, but we're going to alternate, and we're going to do about 1/3 at a time. So I'm going to take my flour, I'm going to put in about 1/3 of the flour. And I'm going to take my milk, I'm going to put in about 1/3 of my milk. It doesn't have to be exact, so you can eyeball it. After that, we're going to whisk in our flour and our milk until that is nice and smooth. When you put the flour in, you'll notice that it gets pretty lumpy. So I'm going to put a little bit more flour in. And then add a little bit of milk, and I'm going to start to whisk that in. And you'll see that it's pretty lumpy, so we just have to keep stirring with the whisk until it gets nice and smooth like that. So it doesn't take too much whisking to get it nice and smooth. After we've gotten rid of pretty much all the lumps there, we're just going to add a little bit more flour and a little bit more milk and whisk it until it's nice and smooth. All right, so now that we have gotten that nice and smooth, gotten all the lumps out of our batter, what we're going to do is get our frying pan ready to cook up these crepes. Okay, so now what we're going to do is cook up our crepes, and to do that we're going to need a small frying pan. I like the non-stick ones, so this is a particularly good one. You can use a bigger frying pan, but the bigger the frying pan, the bigger the crepe. And this one will actually make a crepe which is about the right size for one of our plates. So I'm going to put our frying pan on the stove, turn the stove on to medium-high, medium. You don't want it too hot. And then we're going to let the frying pan get hot. If you put the crepes in when it's cold, they kind of run all over the place. They don't cook very well. If you put them in when the frying pan is hot, it kind of, you put in a little bit, and as you spread it out, it will just kind of firm up so that it's no longer runny, and it gets you a nice shape. Okay. The other thing I'm going to do, just make sure that the crepes don't stick to the pan, because that can make it a real pain to get them out, is I'm going to use a little bit of non-stick cooking spray. I'm going to spray the pan just along the bottom so that's nice and slippery for when we put the crepe batter in. I'm going to grab my crepe batter. I like to leave the whisk in and give it a few stirs every time I pour a little bit in, so that if I notice any lumps as I'm cooking, I've got the whisk right there so I can kind of take care of that. Once the pan is warm enough to put the crepes in, we're going to pour a little bit of the batter in and just kind of move it around to kind of make it take shape. You don't need very much, maybe about 2 or 3 tablespoons worth, and then you just kind of move the pan around to spread the batter around the bottom of the frying pan. And you'll figure out really quick if the pan was warm enough or not, because you get very thin batter on the outside if the pan's not warm enough. If it is warm enough, as soon as the batter hits, it cooks a little bit, and that makes it a little bit thicker. Okay, so we're gonna wait for that to cook, and then we're gonna flip it. So what we're gonna do is spray down the frying pan so that's not sticky. And then we're going to add a little bit of the batter, not too much, just about that much. And then I'm going to just roll the pan to spread the batter out and try to get my crepe nice and round. So it's kind of hard doing it one-handed with the camera in one hand, but there we go. Now you see in the middle here, it looks a little bit runny, and it's a little bit brighter yellow than the outsides, which are cooked. So you kind of judge how well cooked the crepe is based on the color. And what we're going to see is the dull yellow is going to spread more to the middle. Once it's kind of most of the way through, you can flip it, and you can see the middle part is not nearly as runny anymore. So this is getting really close to being able to flip. You can see that the yellow is very dull right up to the middle now. So I'm going to grab my little spatula, and these are thin and kind of delicate, and I gotta flip it. And you can see it's kind of nicely golden on that side. Now you can cook it to your liking. You don't have to cook it as much as I am, but that's how we tend to like it. Sorry, technical difficulties. That's how we tend to like it. And the other thing you're going to notice is it doesn't take as long once you flipped it. So once it's been flipped, you kind of really have to keep an eye on it. Now if you want to see if the other side's done, all I do is kind of lift a corner, and you can see we got that nice brown on that side. So this is probably ready to go. So I'm going to take this out and put it on there, and yep, that one is good. Alright. Now that the frying pan's nice and hot, Gonna give it another quick spray of the nonstick oil, and I'm going to pour in some of our batter, and it will cook up really quick, so we do need to keep an eye on this now. And I'm just going to pour this in and try to turn the frying pan until we get a nice crepe. And you can see we've got that nice edge on there. It didn't get all thin at the sides, and you can see even now it's cooking where it's not very gooey in the middle, and that yellow is getting very dull as it cooks towards the middle. So it cooks it really quick, and so I'm going to be able to flip that any time now. I'm just going to grab my spatula, give this a quick flip. See how nice and golden that is on that side, and it won't take very long now that we flipped it, and that's pretty much it. Once we're done, we have a nice stack of crepes. I find that this will actually make enough crepes for about 4 people, the recipe that I've given you. So I hope you give it a try. I hope you like it.